There we go. Barb, can you hear us online?
Yes,
Great, thank you. So this is a public listening session for City Plan 2024. We're going to start with a introduction and then a brief presentation about the city plan given by Michael Mittag, and then we'll open up to public comment. So we are using an OWL video speaker system here. It will automatically pan the room when you speak up. So if you speak, it will find you. Hopefully it's looking right at me at the moment. But it should sort of self drive. So there we are. We'll see how it works. So we're going to start up here. Oh, I'm Kelsey Peterson, Senior City Planner. I'm staff, not on the commission itself.
Laurie Smith, Planning Commissioner.
Donna Leben, Planning Commission.
Frank McDonald on the Planning Commission.
Michael Mittag, Planning Commission.
Jessica DiBiasio, resident.
Bob Britt, resident.
Penny Tompkins, resident.
And we just had a couple people walk in the room. If you could just state your name.
Ryan Doyle, resident.
Okay.
Nick Atherton, new city planner.
Great, and just after the presentation, we'll open it up to public comment. As I said, it would be great if you just state your name and spell your last before you give comment. There are snacks and some seltzers to the back of the room if anyone would like, and we'll start with Michael's presentation. So.
Really well. So City Plan 2024 is the successor to what was our 2016 comprehensive plan. But now we use the term City Plan 2024. And this is an 8-year plan, so it will run till 2032. Sometimes it's called a municipal plan. Other towns and cities call it a town plan. So we've chosen City Plan 2024 as the official public name for it. Excuse me. So what is it? It's the policy plan for the city for the next 8 years at least, probably more than that. It sets out our long-term goals and proposed actions. As I said, it's effective for 8 years, but probably longer. It's mainly rooted in the land use regulations and future land use plans. Some of the requirements are required by the legislature, by the legislation that empowers the cities and towns to write their municipal or comprehensive plans. As you see in that fourth bullet, it includes some elements which are statutorily required. And they include land use, housing, transportation, economic activity, natural resources, and working lands. And the legislature grants the city greater policymaking power through this plan. Next. So that is our, given the world we're living in now, that is our overarching concern, and I'll read it. It's worth voicing. The world is facing an existential threat from a warming climate and climatic changes with increasingly catastrophic consequences, some of which we've seen here recently. This plan acknowledges this threat and prioritizes mitigation and adaptation measures to address these consequences. Action on climate change is the most important goal of this plan. And then we have 4 guiding principles. Climate resilience, in which we prioritize goals that mitigate climate change impacts. Inclusive, fair, and just, which is really equity, and fairness throughout our community, thoughtful and sustainable built environment, which relates to both our natural and our built environment, and collaborative and engaged, which means we are engaged both with the public and with our neighboring communities. This is the timeline. We started back in March last year, which was the Planning Commission preparation. July to October 22 was an overview to council and their agreement with the direction we were going in. And then until January this year, we were working on the plan, doing initial drafting, mostly the hard work of Kelsey. And then February to May this year, we continued with the drafting of the plan. We're now in the May to August section where we're doing what we do today. 4 of these sessions, this is the second. And there will be more public hearings in the coming months. We need to get this plan to the council, preferably before the end of September, but certainly in October, because the City Council has to hold public hearings on this as well, and they need to have this ready by February, I believe, next year.
Yeah, so we need to adopt, the city council needs to have adopted it by the beginning of February. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but that's also in the middle of their budget season. So we're intending the goal is to have city council in the position to approve it in early to mid-December.
But they need it before the end of February. They've got work to do on it.
Well, they need to have approved it by the end of
Approve it,
February.
yeah. So they need it in September. Preferably. It's tough. You've probably noticed that we've had more than the usual number of planning commission meetings. We had to add a few into the schedule to get this done. But here we are with our first draft. So,
Michael, excuse me,
yeah,
how many people did you get for the first listening session?
4.
And then a few others that came to listen and not comment.
So a very important part of the plan is future land use. And we've divided that up into these sections, principally conservation and open space, principally residential, lower scale or less dense, if you like. Principally residential with more density, higher scale, balanced, mixed residential and commercial industrial with supporting residential. And then there's commercial and industrial only, which you can see is the airport and 1 or 2 areas south of the airport.
And just quick clarification on this map, yellow doesn't show up. So the yellow on the map is what is black text. Everything else is pretty well keyed, but you can't really have yellow text. So that's what we have to do.
It's brown, isn't it, on the?
No, there's the
Black.
brown is the
Black.
orange. The
Black.
orange also doesn't show up, but the black is the yellow.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just, does lower scale just mean there's not much else but housing in the area?
So it's a little bit, it's more about the sort of feel and visual impact of a
Okay.
place. So it's less of, there would be some local amenities, neighborhood serving, commercial, like small shops or a hair salon or something like that. But generally it's, 1 or 2 story buildings.
So like
Yeah.
Chittenden Cider Mill would be a low scale neighborhood because it's got the mill market in it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
You can't see the map online.
Oh, you can't see the map online? Oh,
No, the slides are not moving. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Oh, okay. It says that I'm screen sharing, Barb, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure
you
why.
may be screen sharing, but you're not in slideshow view on screen. So the slides are not moving on screen.
what are you seeing?
I'm seeing City Plan 2024 still.
Oh,
Okay. let's
Sorry to
see.
interrupt.
Oh,
No,
thank you for letting me know, seeing if I'm gonna see if I can fix it.
Click on, there we go.
How's that?
There you go. I've got the map now. Thanks so much.
Sorry about that, Barb. Okay,
Okay,
So is that the map that we are planning on, or is that the map as it is today?
so it's the future land use map. It's based on a lot of what's on the ground already. But there is some, there, sort of the edges and contours of those areas have changed a little bit. But we're not saying, you know, take somewhere that's fully built out as housing and make it, you know, no housing and conservation. There's a few changes, the biggest of which is the purple area is currently a zone that is not, housing residential is not allowed in that area. And so this is something that we'd be exploring in the future as an option to allow some level of housing. What exactly that entails is not decided yet. This is different than the current zoning map. This is the future land use map that then enables changes to zoning to achieve this in the future. Does that answer your question, Bob?
Somewhat.
there are areas, there are industrial areas like Technology Park and Meadowlands, which have quite a lot of open land still, and they're not the kinds of industries that would interfere with the residents' quiet enjoyment of life. So there's a possibility that they could be mixed. In other words, there could be those kinds of businesses and some housing, could be workforce housing, could be whatever. It's not decided, but that, as Kelsey has said, gives the city the opportunity to explore that kind of rezoning option.
So I guess the other clarification is South Burlington, in many areas of the city is that we're not taking a dramatic policy shift from what is built. So it in some ways looks like what is built, but it is also just a statement that what is built or the scale at which something is built is what we intend into the future in some places, in most places, actually.
So where on here is the places where we can build more housing?
Red, orange, yellow, and purple to different extents.
And is
Right.
all the land in the southeast corner
Mhm.
already conserved, or?
Yes.
It's a bit of a mix. Some is regulatorily conserved currently with zoning. Some is privately conserved with like the Vermont Land Trust, et cetera. The very southeasternmost corner is in process of being permanently conserved. That has not been finalized yet, but that's something that's been being worked on for the last 5 years or so. It's the former Eau Claire farm. So it's a mix of things.
That's the bread and butter.
Yeah.
thing?
Yep.
I came in a little
Sure.
late. Outside of the Cider Mill area, it seems like that little orange patch
Yep.
is sort of alone.
Yeah.
What was the thinking on that?
So it is actually, in the previous plan, the current plan that was from 2016, it was actually a red patch with orange around it. So it was intended for even more higher scale development, but that seemed disingenuous. What that is now is the area around the mill market and sort of allowing some additional commercial use in that area, higher scale residential use, like, you know, first floor commercial with a floor above with an apartment or something. And neighborhood serving things in that area as a commercial focus in the southeast quadrant.
How many height of buildings, as far as
So it's
scale?
It's not determined
Okay.
yet. I would, generally speaking, it would be definitely under 4. But
Floors.
yeah, but none of that this is just relative intensity. So it'd be sort of a focus of development right there and having low scale, single family homes, duplexes, try things like that around it. So it's, those kinds of questions are for zoning determinations in the future. It's not something that's determined by this map.
I think, and Kelsey, correct me if I'm wrong, mostly encompasses the middle market.
Yep.
And the garage next door, that takes up most of that
Yeah,
space.
it's a little bit larger than that, but that's the focus is around that.
And in the southeast quadrant?
Yeah.
The blank yellow space, is that Cider Mill Phase 3?
Phase
Um,
2,
Phase 2,
sort of off of Heinsberg Road, but south of Butler Farms.
yeah.
Yeah, that's part of Cider Mill 2. That's accessed from Cider Mill 1, but that has already been approved for housing. Yeah. No, it won't let me, now that I've corrected it for Barb, it won't let me, oh, there we go. Now it's gonna jump too far. Okay,
So, it's fairly obvious from what you see there, the plan sections. If you are looking at the draft that's online, you can click on, in the table of contents, if you click on one of those labels, it will take you directly to that section. So I don't think there's much for me to say about that.
yeah, the only other thing was, in each section, it has the components that are on the left. Goals are the outcomes that we're trying to accomplish. If we looked back in 10 years, like how much progress have we made? Have we accomplished something? And actions are the steps to reach that. So just a little clarification about those two things.
Okay. Let's,
This is one more slide.
okay, so those are the focuses, climate action mitigation, climate change mitigation and resilience, housing, creating a city center, which we're partway there. Certain things are missing that we hope to get in the future, like village green. Building community, which means connecting people, and environmental protection, which means protecting our biodiversity and our environment. So all of that is covered in our LDRs, in the environmental protection standards, which is in chapter 12 of the land use regulations. But the only questions about this, go ahead. But I think we could.
Yep.
Open it up now. I said my say. We're now going to listen to you.
So just a couple of pieces about how this will work. It is not intended to be a discussion. It's not a back and forth. It's a listening session for the commissioners to hear all of you. I will also be taking notes on what is shared today. I can also answer any factual or clarification questions, but it's not intended to be a debate or something similar. If you attend today and you think later that you have something you'd like to add in writing, you can email us. Our email address is up on the screen. You can call or you can stop by. We're up on the 3rd floor of this same building. And if you're, our elevator to the 3rd floor is not currently functioning. So if you get to the building and you would prefer us to come down to you on the 1st floor, we can also do that. You just have to call. Hi.
When we send it to planning,
Yeah.
do the commissioners all see it?
It will go to staff, and then the commission will get all comments compiled into a packet for their August 8th meeting. So I should include that on the slide. The deadline for written feedback is August 2nd. And the intention for August 2nd is so that I can put it into the packet so that the planning commission has it over the weekend before their August 8th meeting. I should still say this is still the informal process. This is the listening sessions, public outreach. There will still be an additional formal process of formal public hearings that, as Michael said, will occur in September. That will be at the planning commission. Then there will be an additional formal public hearing process at the city council. So this is the chance to provide feedback on the draft to get into the formally warned draft or formally warned document. But there are additional opportunities later. I would just encourage you to get whatever you would like to add in as soon as possible. Yeah.
On order, this lady came in late and this gentleman came in late. We didn't get your names.
Dorothea Pinar, and I live in the Cider Mill.
Mike Scanlon, I live Dorset Park behind Memorial, right here last year, but bought here in 2016.
Great. So whenever whenever you have, if you have a comment, then I would love for you to state your full name again and spell your last name, just so that I can take accurate notes. So we can start with whoever has anything to share.
Well, I'll start.
Yep.
Penny Tompkins, PENNE TOMPKINS.
Okay.
I guess I'm here as both, I'm the chair of the Public Art Committee, so I probably should include that in my mention, and have volunteered on that for a couple of years. So I've been involved in this process of looking at sections. Public art was very little, well, wasn't even mentioned really in the 2016. We didn't have a public art committee until I think 2016, and started meeting in 2017. So this is a little awkward because I'm not gonna speak for the committee, so I'll speak about my own experience of it, because I don't, our committee will be giving formal response to the last version of the plan, or a written response to things, but in the overview and in this plan, what I'm hoping is that it will reflect sort of arts and culture and the importance of arts and culture to the city as a whole, even in these overviews of some of the overlying goals. There's a mention of culture, but it feels that's too light, because it's really the arts and culture have important influence on our overall well-being, the enjoyment of art, the experience of art in nature, various things. So it feels at this point, from what the parts of the plan I've read, and I admit I have not read all 112 pages, so it's not coming across as strongly as I would hope it might, even as a citizen, obviously of a bias on the public art side. And the other part, just to mention in reviewing the plan, is that since there wasn't really a public art committee and there was a section on culture and history, the goals of some of public art for our city are incorporated within a section called culture, history, and something else, community, I think. And so it's a really important section, but it's a section that's now combining multiple ideas. So it's just good if we can try to be sure that the wording in a section like that, that's incorporating a couple of very different ideas, is clear and sets some understanding for intentions for the city in the long range. So I think that's the main thing. Yeah. And there's some sections where there are parts where it feels like some of the language from what I read previously has changed a bunch. And so some of it I hope will be more reflective of a broader view of arts and culture for the city. So I think that's it.
Thank you.
Dorothea Penar, Penar. I'm
Dorothy or Dorothea?
Dorothea. I'm a historic preservation planner, but I'm also really interested in conservation, land conservation and such. I would like to see, I've just to preface it, I've been on the Shelburne Historic Preservation Commission for many years. And that's where I lived prior to moving here 8 years ago. I'd like to see a focus on the quote areas that you want to see redevelopment. Like the mall, for instance, in the sea of concrete that we see there. Seems like such a wonderful place to incentivize redevelopment and also focusing on that center idea. I say this to Shelburne too, let's not go into new lands when we can maybe use other lands that need to be redeveloped on the corridor of Route 7. So I guess I would like to see sort of some kind of homage to that idea of redeveloping areas where the use is less than what we would like to see in the future. It's already been disturbed, and maybe some kind of incentivizing
for that kind of redevelopment. And the mall just comes up because I go by it all the time thinking, wow, most of the time it's totally empty there. And they even have a parking garage. It's just been unused. It just seems like a no-brainer.
A question, do you have examples of places where they've successfully done this? Because and often, you know, particularly from a planning commission standpoint, it's really helpful to have seen places that have done it before, and then we can look at how did they do it? Because, you know, that property is owned by one developer right now, and how do you work with them to
In this around
encourage?
here, no, I mean, I've worked in,
No, any place. It doesn't have to be
yeah,
around
I
here.
worked in New Haven, Connecticut, and other places like that where that was a focus too, although keeping historic resources are always tricky in areas like that. It's in the village, like, for instance, of Shelburne, especially with the new housing act, it is a little bit tricky to protect what you want to protect and yet redevelop what you want to redevelop. We've actually done some poorly done things in Shelburne on the corridor. For instance, the bowling alley that was just taken down. Perfect opportunity to put housing because you've got the bus line and such. And it did not go through. It met some resistance within the neighborhood. Like I said, I try not to get too involved because I don't live there anymore and as a taxpayer. So, but that was just an opportunity, totally lost. And I know, I know Shelburne more than I know South Burlington really. And on a planning point of view, there are several examples of real opportunities lost. Because they didn't say, this is our focus, we want to see redevelopment here. How can we incentivize it? Tax structures, I don't know. That side, I'm not well versed, but there's just got to be some ways to do that better.
Dorothea, what kinds of objections did you hear about housing where the bowling alley was?
It's just hearsay, you know, what people have told me. I think they were concerned about the density too much, I think, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But I think it was also just the concern of balance of occupied, owner-occupied build, you know, space versus rental space, and having a balance because the neighborhoods around it are all single-family houses for the most part, some duplexes.
Isn't there a trailer park nearby?
Pardon?
There's a trailer park just a bit further
Right, that's where my son lived until just recently, right? And actually, we lived like 2 streets over on a street where Colette's Furniture. So I know that area. That's extremely successful, low-income housing situation, and it has been made into a co-op, and it's tremendously difficult to even get in it. The houses are snatched up as soon as they're on the market because it is so reasonable, well placed on the bus line and well coordinated as far as the committee that works there. Very, very protective of what goes on in that environment. They were not against, is my impression, the higher density. It was more across Route 7. That's what I heard.
Why are people so afraid of the word density?
Okay, this is a public listening session.
I'm just
This is-
asking.
No, I understand, but this is kind of, we have a lot of people in the room, and if you want to have further discussion after, or at the end of everybody having a comment, that would be fine. I just want to keep, we have about an hour left and we have several more people. Thanks, Lana. Anyone next? Bob?
Sure, Bob Britt, B-R-I-T-T. I want to start by saying I'm totally unprepared for this meeting. I've probably read less than 10% of the document. This is an extremely tight timeline when you got a lot of balls in the air, this whole listening thing. So I hope city residents have a chance to really scrutinize this. And I'm here, and there's so few people that are coming to these things, so I'm really concerned that people won't know what's in this plan. when it's finished.
So just as a clarification for everybody, this process has been going on for about 6 months. And this draft was published on July 6th for these listening sessions. So we gave several weeks of lead time for these, but heard, I hear your feedback.
So it's just to clarify, sorry, Bob, these actually weren't on the calendar until a week ago for the city.
Okay.
But
Okay, so just in the introduction, I guess I'm somewhat concerned that the environmental, so that this is fourth paragraph, second sentence, the overriding objective of the plan is to make, which is fine. But it seems to me it should say, as it impacts the city and greater region, not just say the city, because building housing and developing in South Burlington will prevent people commuting from Heinsberg and other outlying cities, and will save a lot more fuel. So I'm worried about this thing trumping everything else, no matter what, is when you're saying that, oh, wait a minute, we can connect this to the region and yet, oh, no, sorry, we're only considering South Burlington. So I know that there is discussion later on about regional, but it's down 4 bullet points. Under climate resilient, the wording is to keep the city safe. And I wanted to know what the definition of to keep this, what are we keeping the city safe from? Our city is lucky that we are living on ridges and that we have low flood. So this is a good place to have housing so that it's not in floodplain. You mentioned thoughtful and sustaining built environment, invest in a welcoming and walkable built environment. I think it should have I'm biased because I'm on the bike and ped committee, but a comma, bikeable and walkable built. And under collaborative and engaged, I think in that sentence that it's missing a phrase after, so encouraging community businesses, comma, local job creation, comma, and multimodal transportation and a multimodal transportation network. Because we need to figure out how to connect these towns so that people can get out of their cars and get on the buses and on the bikes and walking. I don't know. I'm scared of the future land use map and some of the other things in reading it because I'm very concerned. I'm concerned that there's 9 pages on the environment and 3 on recreation and 6 on transportation. It just seems to be something that I'm somewhat wary of. I am totally in support of fighting climate change, but I just want to see balance in the plan. Environmental goals. First one, conserve at least 51% of the city land area. Where did that come from? It just seems, it's well intended, I'm sure, but it seems wrong. We are the city of South Burlington. We need to be the urban core, part of the urban core, and allow for conservation and open space to be, yes, in the city so that people have access, but most of it to be outside the city, in the state. under environmental actions, it's create and implement a new open space plan. So that is not in place now. Okay,
There's an old one.
got it. Sorry. I'm gonna go through them all. I have not fully read the transportation one, which I'm most interested in, but I do not think, I skimmed it before the meeting here, and I did not see mention of complete streets and safe routes to school. And when we're out getting grants for bike paths and sidewalks and crosswalks, having those buzzwords in. And again, I haven't looked for the words like vulnerable users. So that would be something, but again, I'm sorry, I just have not had a chance to read it. And that's it.
But I will say that those exact phrases are not included, but there is significant discussion about equity and accessibility and vulnerable users. So when you do get a chance to read it, I'm hoping that you'll be happy
Okay.
with it.
I'm just more concerned when we share our comprehensive plan
Yeah.
with the V-Trans
Right,
and
that you've
others,
had
so we
those
have
programs and things.
some hooks in there. So I mean,
Yep.
and I may be wrong, but because I don't do the grants usually, city does, but
Thank you.
Kelsey, we vote, so we
Oh. Okay, next. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, hi, Mike Scanlon, SCANLAN. As I mentioned, when I refought South Burlington in 2016, 16 years ago, we were coming to Vermont. We had university here, education here, and we knew that at some point in our transition plan would be coming. And we chose South Burlington specifically for two reasons. We traveled around Western Northern Vermont and included South Burlington because of the schools, a child, but also because of the importance of the schools, grades in general, and the comprehensive plan at the time, which was very impressive. So I wanted to just start off by thanking you all for being phenomenal. Climate helped us, if you were not involved as we did before, to make the decision to choose South Burlington. And it's very clear, having read the document in quite detail, very, very not a lot of work. So also just thank you for writing it. So all my comments are aimed at trying to basically improve upon what I think is in general a good document. I guess what I was struck about a little bit by reading this document compared to the last one was the introductory film, and it goes a little bit to what I think Han was saying, sort of an alarmist sense. And I came here because of the aspirational views of the last human-based community, an urban center, but yet green areas close by, et cetera, et cetera. And now we read it, very important parties fully subscribe to that, so we all need to move in all aspects of life, from high carbon functionality to low carbon functionality. But I hope it doesn't, I don't think it needs to create the impression that it's an either or, that we meet the climate change objectives, but yet we give up on what was so appealing in your last one, which is about the human-based community, a vibrant community, job employment, mobility, et cetera. I think it's very, very important. In fact, if we're even as an example to other communities, that it's a false choice when people say you have to, fight climate change, but you basically have to fundamentally give up on the notions of how you can have the life that you want. Yes, there'll be adjustments, and I think this is what we're trying to do. So I would just strongly urge that the language basically reflects. I'm sure that was the intent. That we are basically embracing these things to move towards low carbon job and employment. We're moving this to low carbon transportation. We're moving to create the vibrant, human focused community that we all want to live in. So I would I know it's tough to write, but I think that would be very important and welcome. And I think would also create greater sort of engagement. One thing I have been struck in South Burlington is also the lack of civil participation. I think when we moved to Vermont, we had this idealized version of, small town communities participation. 20% of the population voted in the city council elections. And I lived in Falls Church, Virginia. And to your question about examples, Falls Church being a small community of two square miles, 15,000, so more densely than this. But they managed to maintain a sense of the small city in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, as Arlington as well. But it's because they had a sense of we are Falls Church, and I do. And one of the things we liked about the South Burlington charter was the idea is to create a we are South Burlington, not to exclude the other community. But my overall impression after lived here for a year and just be a friend, I joined the Economic Development Council, I'm now the commissioner to the GMT for South Burlington. I believe that we have to participate. I'm not just talking it, I don't carry it on. We have a young son, and we see our issue here. Is that most people still do not see South Burlington, and I assume this is part of the goal here, as a separate municipality or community or city. I think most people I talk to, friends I get to know through my son's activities, see South Burlington as a suburb of Burlington, and not as an end state in and of itself. So I think obviously I strongly support the notion of the city center. Glad there's mention of revisiting this notion of a common space. I would just like to posit that common meeting ground is fine, but it's not the same kind of need and livable, vibrant space. And I still think that within the context of the University Mall, a walking street, a piazza or square where you have restaurants, cafes, where you on a daily basis have this social interaction. Because green spaces are pleasant when you go for picking yourself or for events, which I think are fantastic. I enjoy the Thursday night outs out at Soho from our memorial. But I think if everyday life has you constantly interacting, it creates a good sense of community and also just the proximity. So on how to your question and how we incentivize, I think that a clear statement that that's an aspirational goal of the community. I read through the economic section, and again, I'm just speaking as Mexican and not as any of these other positions that I participating in. The community would welcome to see the development of. At the end of the day, all corporate companies, corporations are citizens of the community as well. I think in the city of Falls Church, I was just there, seeing friends on vacation with my family. They've taken two areas, one the size of University Mall, transformed to one lot smaller, and both of them have, one has these little inside the buildings, a walking area with little kids fountains. The other one has a full-on walking street. Obviously, same thing, commercial developing land. There must have been, so I'm sure the city of Falls Church would be happy to share their experiences, and I'm sure that others closer to supply. So I would just say, let's not give up on it. I think the benefit to it would be tremendous. And also the one thing else in the city center, just on the experiences, having owned apartments that are owned or townhouses that are owned, or I think also provides that about. Obviously, there's a mix, but ownership with it brings a little bit more commitment to saying the part of it. I mean, I welcome the fact that we have these apartments. I welcome that we finally have a critical mass in the city center to create the buying, purchasing power demand necessary to motivate coffee shops, restaurants, or whatever it could be here. But also the people who occupy that, particularly graduate students, now graduate students. I was not really interested in the community that I was. It was a period in my life to move on. I love to take care of the benefits, whether I was in Washington or in Boston area. So I would just think that is something that I think it's zoning, we try to also incentivize somehow some people who are actual stakeholders in the community. I lived up in Capitol Hill, our community was mobilized because we lived there, we owned it, we wanted to create the possibility. I guess the other, sort of aspiration I would have is, just more of a reflection of the importance of school. And one of the things, again, that attracted us to South Burlington was, at the time, it was the best school system in Vermont, and so obviously it was a no-brainer in that sense, because, childhood versus priority. Wonderful experience with the teachers, the principals, et cetera, of school that's right back here. However, overwhelmed, crowded, student teaching ratio had gone from 14 to 22. The challenges that they have because of staffing. So that education and competitiveness of the school system likely will go down. And if that's the case, that we all will, because I think having a good school system is what also we're trying to attract good investors. They want to come and work in a place where if their workers work, they basically have access to the school. When people come, they want good housing, access to sort of amenities and good schooling. And so I think we shouldn't try to give up on that. And I'm sort of surprised that it's not reflected. Again, in my experience in Arlington and Falls Church, it is one of the core issues of, excellence in schooling. I mean, there is a reference here to education, but it's an education about equity. Great. But equity is about education that is of excellence and aspirational. And that there's nothing more equitable in terms of writing society than strong education and excellent education that is by state. So I would strongly encourage to do that. We see Addison County moving to the International Baccalaureate program, very creative. Both Arlington and Falls Church do that. It's been very successful for all levels of the socioeconomic strata. And I guess the last point, I guess I would share, and again, I'm sharing this spirit that you have a good product. We're all searching for, and give this up early, about, the center of the world in the sense that you can have take needed to, you can have a certain amount of dynamic urban community, but yet have great access to the outdoor. And I think that's what we're all hoping for. Is on public transportation. I think there needs to be more of an emphasis, and you're doing the transportation part where you reference the GMT as a point. But if you look into the introductory, whether it's the transit routes or it is, I think it's a lot. I think that a more clear statement about the primacy importance of public bus. I've only attended one GMT meeting, but I was very heartened to hear that a priority of theirs is to focus on what they call choice users, people who choose to ride in a car or a bus, and how do you incentivize people to get on a bus? So I think there the thinking is good. It works with us because at the end of the year, biking, fully support, walking, fully support, things that was set out, I would argue that we need to have, when they say we'll finish this, set clear target dates or points from certain parts of the weather here. You're not always on the bus, on a bike or walking. So public transportation, if we're having these units where they're, and I think what I'm saying is the GMT, I think will be amenable, because if we're saying we can link up our sort of dense areas of living to our dense areas of working or sort of amenable, I think it will be amenable to changing it. Of course, it's 13 municipalities are participating, but there seems to be a shared view that as an organization, they need to expand the choice. They have those people who have no choice but to, and they're trying to accommodate them. The real success of public transportation is to motivate people who do have an option to move on to it. So I would that would be my final comment. But again, thank you for your hard work and commitment and the openness to us.
Thank you. Very quick clarification, the school system does there's a separate planning process. So it's similar to this, but it's the school district planning. So some of the issues that you raised, like putting value on education, absolutely includes in this plan, is in this plan, but some of the details about, school ratios and things, it's a little bit separated in Vermont. That the municipal side is more land use and some of these other things, and then the school does their own.
I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of the safety budget, and I've attended the school stuff, and I'm on the school committee as well. But I do think we're trying to emphasize what are the priorities, because this does say the priorities.
Yep.
And so right now, if you just look at the introduction, there's in a list, high quality of life, public safety, housing, program, education field. And it's just it's a passing reference on the list. To me, that is not examples that, if I were a business looking to invest, or when we were looking to move here, I read this, So I think there's, and I'm, welcome very much that there was a meeting, July 10th between this, school boards with. I would encourage those to be more frequent. I would encourage us to be hand in glove because having participated in committees on both sides, I didn't get that sense. And so I welcome the fact that there's a movement in that direction.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware there's another, this is not the only planning that's done for the school
But this
system.
is also underscores what are our priorities. How do we see ourselves as a community and what do we want to invest in? Because at the end of the day, it is also investment that we're doing now with Dorset Street and our creative place.
Thanks.
Say anything before I.
I'm just listening.
Yeah.
don't know if I have anything to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
my name's Ryan Doyle, EOYLD. My first statement is Mike's game of the mayor. I think that would be a really good way to move the city in a positive direction. I think that really long discussions can be boring and it's easy for us to fall asleep and tune out. So I'm actually gonna make this a little bit more participatory. So I would really love more participation in either raising your hand or making a guess when I ask for guessing questions. And that's sort of to gauge a sense of where we're at and the way we think about things, particularly in terms of the types of people who tend to both serve on boards and come out to meetings. Of which there are never young adults at these things. According to Donna, I'm not a young adult. So
Why aren't you a young adult?
got you, because I'm not 35 or younger. I know. It's because I'm so short. So my first question is, how many of you are renters? Including staff, no renters. We got 2 renters in the room. Cool. So of you who own a home, how many of you have owned your home for more than 3 decades? More than 2 decades? More than
Share a
1
home.
decade? Less than 5 years? So approximate, yeah. So I want to move to some guessing questions. And first thing is going to be, what does my landlord pay in taxes? I rent a house. It was built in 1957. It was originally 1,200 square feet. It has had 3 additions put on it. One is a screened-in porch. One is a attached garage. And one is an in-law apartment above the garage with another bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen. Not a kitchenette, but a full kitchen. So now it's more like 1,800, 1,900 square feet. We sit on just over a 1/4 acre, but the lot's a little funky shape, so there's a weird corner that I can't get into, and there was a brush pile that was about 25 by 40 feet and 5 feet high when I moved in. What do you think, just a couple people to just guess really quick, what do you think that's assessed at the city level?
The house?
Yeah, the house. House property together.
5,000.
I would think that's like 425.
Any other guesses? It's actually 390. That was a couple of years ago. Zillow currently says 550 as an estimate, but Zillow is very different from what we assess taxes at or tax value at. So what do you think that comes to? Another couple guesses in terms of what my landlord pays in taxes a year. Ballpark it.
6,000.
Probably,
5,500, 6,000.
Almost 8,000.
Is that
Remember,
Burlington?
South
It's a
Burlington.
rental.
It's a rental, so it's a commercial property. And actually in South Burlington, the commercial tax rate is not as proportionally higher than residential compared to other municipalities in the state of Vermont. It's actually not that bad, but yeah, it's like 78, 57 or something like that. So then the big question is, what do you think I pay in rent every month?
Are you renting the ADU or the main house?
There is only one entrance So I'm renting the
whole
whole
thing.
house and quarter acre.
So you have two renters on the property.
No,
No, just
it is one singular rental. There happens to be a stairway going upstairs with a second kitchen, bedroom and bathroom. There are 3 bedrooms downstairs built in the 1957 format. So
22,000.
Four thousand,
Oh,
For a
way
whole
more.
house?
For a whole house, way more. Way more.
3,500.
I'd say that's it. Actually say more.
pretty good. 3,200
Yeah, wow.
plus utilities. So gas and electric in the summer and winter is quite high. It's not very well insulated. So that alone is about 500 a month. A bad winter will go up from there. When you actually look at all of the costs of housing, that is 4,000 a month to rent a house. Me and my partner share a bedroom. It is a child's bedroom by 1950 standards, which means it's 80 square feet. For reference, that's about a queen bed and a dresser, right? And you can only get out one side of the bed. So it's very different coming into the housing market late than it is when you've been in it for a while, whether even if you're new here and you owned before, at least you have equity. But for me and my generation, you graduated into a recession and then things were weird for a while, then we had a second recession. With housing constriction, it's really tough to get into housing. It costs a lot of money. So right now, $4,000 a month goes to renting and not building equity. And then once my student loans come back on at the federal level, that'll be $500 a month for student loans, which I'll pay off a little after I start collecting Social Security. And then my partner and her student loans, because she became a doctor. So when you think about that, the cost just to live in this community is incredibly high for anyone who doesn't own or who hasn't either lived here a long time or been able to roll their equity over into living here. There's a lot of issues with that. Some of it is the way we have approached development in Vermont for a long time. But also, there's a lot of ways to increase development. This plan certainly looks at some of those things, the way we can infill and lessen the scarcity of housing. And we should definitely do that. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is an equity and justice issue that is preeminent and often goes overlooked. We can talk about how important the environment is, and it is very important. I have a degree in environmental engineering. Not to confuse you, that does have more to do with like water, wastewater, but also a minor in sustainable energy systems and a major in civil engineering. So my background is not something that hits the environment. I really do like it. But we really need to make assessments that are focused on equity. And like your comment with why do people oppose density or apartments, right? These are NIMBY issues. We have to be able to really distinct and clarify if we're doing a policy because it benefits the whole city or because it only benefits a subset of residents who have a particular niche interest, right? And of course, any neighborhood wants to resist change on some level. That's totally fair. But if we resist a lot of change, like someone else's comment, it just pushes people to then develop in Heinsberg, where it's easier and cheaper. And then all those people are going to drive through our city streets to get here to the amenities that we have to offer. And that is bad for the environment. And so I'm going to echo some other people and say that I think the direction that the Planning Commission went by split vote about a month ago to prioritizing this sort of climate issue, I think is out of scale with the priorities of the city and the residents here. It's not that it doesn't matter, it's very important. But what we often find across the country when we start to talk about the climate is we really start advocating NIMBY issues that don't address equity or justice. And so I'm actually very worried that this plan is going to push and promote worse NIMBY issues that actually don't really address the environment at its heart. And I want to make sure that we're building in language that really does protect justice and equity here. I want to include one more story about that. Last year, I was a substitute teacher at the middle school every single day. And because I have an engineering degree, it means I can actually teach algebra. So I get into algebra teacher is going to be out for a long time for surgery. So obviously the class can't get behind. I get in there, I'm reading my notes the first morning, and there's a note. It says, if student X is asleep in class, let her sleep. She works until 11 o'clock at night. She's 13 years old. He's aware of this. Schools have gotten a lot better at accommodating students and their needs. Our schools are pretty good. I've been really impressed with a number of the teachers that I've met here. And it's probably one of the most positive work environments I've ever had. And so he's explaining why the student needs to be left alone to sleep. And just to like take some notes, let him know when he gets back, give him some updates about her. But that's incredibly sad. As much as we have lots of developments in this community with 30-foot wide streets for some reason and curbs, and really big houses that cost $6, $7, $8, $1.2 million, there's a lot of people who are poor. There's a lot of people who spend much more than 30 or 40% of their income on housing. There are people who spend more than 50% of their income on housing, which was me when I was a substitute teacher, because just my share, my fifth share of that apartment was more than half of what I was making. So I want you guys to be able to reflect. And yeah, so I keep looking towards you because you're making great eye contact. I also don't have glasses on, so I really want to encourage everyone, not just on this committee, not just those who participate publicly, but on the city council and our other city boards, to keep in mind that we have a large population that doesn't really have any representation and whose voices are never brought to the forefront. And it's really important that all of us try to apply that lens, even if we don't personally have those experiences. I would consider myself middle class, and I don't consider myself economically at risk in any way. I feel very privileged. I grew up in Vermont. I came back after college. I love it here. I really don't want to move anywhere else. It is ridiculously expensive though. And so again, help those of us who are actually born here stay here, while attracting people like Mike who have really cool experience and skills that can add to our community, rather than just being random people who come in, buy land, and don't participate in the community. I do want to not get into too many other weeds on this, but I do want to bring up a few other general things about the plan. One of them is that I don't see a lot of transition planning going on in this document. We definitely have things from the last plan and things continue on. I would like to see more sense of what is the time frame of some of these goals. Some goals really do need to have a pretty immediate time frame, especially when it's something like collecting data. If we don't even know our existing conditions, how do you plan? When I was on the planning commission in St. Albans, we often were asking for more data. That was probably the question we asked the most. Staff, where's this data? How do we get it? So that we could then make better decisions as a planning commission. And then also, what are we putting in there that's a long range plan? When it says we want to make Williston Road 1 lane in each direction, when? Can't do that next year. It's 30,000 vehicles per day on it. How much other infrastructure or reduction in vehicles do you have to make in order for that to even be feasible, right? So when we have things in the plan that say pursue exit 13 becoming a full exit, reserve space for exit 12B in case those recommendations turn out to be fruitful in the long run, yeah, we're looking at a decades-long process to try to reduce traffic there and incorporate that into the downtown. But unfortunately, if you look on the city website, you can't find a plan for the downtown. None of that's there. I'm glad to see that the city has it as the city council has a priority statement saying that updating the website is one of the things that they really want to do this year. But how well will that be updated if our comprehensive plan doesn't say what we need in public outreach? One of the comments today was not a lot of people come to these things. I'm not surprised. Like I said, these dates were on the calendar until a week ago because I had to remind staff that they weren't on the calendar. That's not very effective. You go to the homepage and it says, "So Night Out, all of these Thursdays, these are the bands that are playing." Cool. And then city plan, click for details, little text, size 11. That's not how you engage people to participate. I probably spend 5 hours a day right now looking things on the website, emailing staff, calling staff, emailing the state, emailing VTrans, regional planning to try to get information. It is like pulling teeth. If we don't, in the comprehensive plan, address communication and outreach in a more direct way, we aren't going to ensure that the city council does something in an effective way. Because remember, our city council only represents a small sliver of our population. Right? They almost exclusively, the exception of Megan, live in the southeast quadrant, all next to each other, along with 2 of our
Not
senators.
me.
City council. And so
And you're not allowed to use it.
And so they aren't always aware, and they're not here listening to me talk about how they're missing a lot of the input in the city because they haven't welcomed it in. And that could even be part of the problem. Maybe those voices haven't been welcomed in the past. And we really need to do a lot more to bring them in. Another thing that's on the city council's priority list is how we train our volunteer committee members. I think all of you can remember at some point joining a committee and being like, what the heck is going on? It's very hard to become educated and caught up to speed. I go to a lot of different city meetings, either in person, like with your committee, or on the Zoom equivalent. And the number of things that committees talk about that are the same across the board is kind of staggering, like the transit issue. And then the number of things that people aren't aware of happening in other parts of the city. It's almost like the communication doesn't happen within the city itself. So I would really encourage you to focus on a way that we can make communication, outreach, and transparency a distinct and clear part of this plan with real goals and real action items. Without doing that, we aren't really making any encouragement for the city to do a good job when they update the city's website. One of the other things that I've noted is that in some cases, it does talk about partnerships, but it doesn't get a lot of depth into those partnerships. When we think about government in Vermont, we have a lot of small towns, and then we have state level government. We don't have county level government. We have regional planning commissions, but they assist municipalities. They don't do a ton of together things for municipalities. So like, yes, here's your county transportation plan. Yeah, I'm not impressed with it, to be honest. It's not that they aren't working hard, it's that their charge from the state, I think, is kind of weak. If we want to do something like address climate and the way that so many commuters come in from a half hour away, which includes 1/3 of all working people who live in Franklin County, commute to Chittenden County. That's why that section of highway north of exit 14 sees 55,000 vehicles per day, like in one direction. North. That's astounding, right? That's so many people. That on-ramp, that one on-ramp from Williston Road heading north, over 7,000 vehicles per day. That is a lot, right? If we don't have better plans at a regional level that we can get towns to either agree on, that either, one town launches or that regional planning launches or another combined entity, we can't tackle most of the things that we talk about tackling. we're no longer at the point where a municipality is simply trying to debate whether or not they have police or retain the sheriff. We have so many detailed things that we're trying to do. We really need to identify which of our projects and goals need more regional partners. And is that just the neighboring towns? Or is that the whole county? Or does that spread beyond the county?
So
I would
Ryan, you've
really
got
like to
about
see-
20 minutes. We have a few people, we have
Online, would like to
people
see.
online, yeah. So
Sure.
if we could move to people online, that would be great. And then we can
Absolutely.
circle back to anyone else in the room who has additional comment after that. So online, Barb, it sounded like you may have something you wanted to share. Can anyone online hear me? I just want to make sure that this is still all working correctly.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew. Barb, did you have a comment? She may have something in the chat. Oh, not in a place where I can share. Okay, Barb, if you wanted to send any comment to by email, or you could call us at a later time, just to the office directly, that would work to share any comments that you have. Is there anyone else online who had something to add? Whoop, another chat bubble. Thank you, Barb. Okay, I don't think we have anything else online. Did anyone else in the room? I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Did you?
Jessica.
Jessica, did you have something you wanted to share?
This has been very informative. I agree the regional plan needs to be emphasized. I commute to Heinsberg.
Oh, how did you spell your last name?
DEBIASIO.
Thanks.
I'm also a middle school teacher, so I appreciate that you spent some time doing community service in middle school. Yeah, my concern is, I think I'm supportive of South Burlington protecting or conserving that land in the southeast quadrant, and sort of limiting development down there. But in the sense that I'm not sure that Heinsberg or Shelburne are really, I don't know what they're doing for their own land conservation, and it feels, I spend a lot of time on the Route 7 corridor. I live right off Route 7, and it just feels like endless sprawl, which is fine. Route 7 is the place for it, but I'm just wondering, like, where, if we're thinking about towns, sort of like where the town center is and sort of pushing development in that direction. But I don't disagree that we definitely need some sort of regional plan. I think the growth is gonna happen in Heinsberg, whether we build houses here. You know, if we build a ton of houses here, that's great. Heinsberg is still gonna grow, which is not necessarily a bad thing either. But I would also wanted to say that I think, unlike some other people in the room, I am not concerned that there is a huge emphasis on climate change in the city plan. And I think we need to shout it from the rooftops that that's what our city is focusing on. And hopefully some other cities will hear that and then also prioritize. I don't disagree that, you know, recreation is important and other aspects of planning is important, but you know, I learned about climate change when I was in first grade and I'm almost 40, so it's about time we started prioritizing it over other things. My other big thing is biking. I really love to bike. I know the city talks about prioritizing biking, but it is really not a very bikeable place. So that's my other thing, which, and I know you reference it in this planning document. And I don't think the planning document is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the sort of outline where the bike paths are gonna go. But I know in my neighborhood, there's one right of way from our street to the bike path. And it's not on my, it's not on my street. And so if it hadn't, my voice is just, this is my voice. If someone hadn't put that sort of right of way in, like all these houses couldn't access the bike path. And so my other question is, where is the city sort of putting into the sort of like the meat of the bylaws that there has to be access, like pedestrian or bicycle access through these neighborhoods that are getting developed. Because the one that's in my neighborhood off Orchards gets used a ton, and we are just discussing on our street, like, can we buy a like right of way from our one neighbor who's letting us access the bike path? And it would just be nice if that was sort of prioritized, and I don't know if that's in the plan document at all, I had to say it out loud. But otherwise, I really appreciate the thoughtful comments from everyone in the room. I had nothing prepared. I just came to listen, so thank you.
Yeah, so just a little bit of information, just
Yeah.
clarification. So some of what you're talking about would be happening in a bike ped master planning process, which is
Yeah.
underway for this fiscal year. So that's something that is already moving forward. The city plan is kind of the umbrella plan, and we joke a little bit that this plan is shifting a little more towards understanding South Burlington as a city that has too many policies and too much going on to be all in one document. So there's a little bit of identifying the need for future planning, and it's a plan to make more plans, which sounds kind of
Yeah.
facetious, but that's sort of what it is. So that is something that's occurring. There are other plans that are at the similar scale, like a parks master plan, housing needs assessment, economic
Right.
development plans that are all cultural or arts plans that are all things that would be moving forward in the next few years.
Right.
From the actual regulations on the ground for new development, there's a lot of that in the LDRs now. But what's still in process is the regulations that apply to a development are the ones that they were approved under. So we still have developments that are being constructed now that look like, oh, they must have been approved in the last year, that were actually approved 5, 10, 15 years ago because of various delays and litigation and all sorts of things. So there is a lot in the current land development regulations. There's a lot more to do. And there's definitely a lot to do about connecting. You know, there can be requirements for sidewalks and paths and things in developments, but when it's a private development, they don't have a requirement to connect past their property line. So there's a lot of that connection work that we need to be doing, some of which is regulatory, but a lot of which will be non-regulatory, working with property owners, working with nonprofits, et cetera. But you're still seeing developments that are going in that were not necessarily required to have some of those things. So there's a little bit of time delay. So the buildings next to us here were all approved very recently, but there are other developments throughout the city that were approved and under rules that were effective in 2005, 2009, 2013. So there's sort of a patchwork of different regulations right now. So we're moving forward and we're doing what we can. And there's going to be a lot of non-regulatory work that'll have to happen in those newly constructed, but possibly non-compliant areas. But even more importantly, reinvestment in a lot of our existing areas. So areas around here, the existing neighborhoods around this area, your neighborhoods off of Shelburne Road, there's significant housing opportunities in those areas that were not invested in or built at a time where walking, biking, et cetera, was the priority. They were built to be car focused. So there's a lot of work to be done in those areas to make them thriving neighborhoods into the future. So it's a big patchwork of things that are happening. But I hope that is a little bit of assurance that it's things that are moving forward and there's a lot of tools in the toolbox for how to address them. Yeah, Mike.
Just to expand on the communication strategy there, I think if any business, we've all worked, we've all done a communication speed up internally, externally, so I think that's always strongly, I was happy also to see discussion in the city council retreat about the webpage. I saw that there wasn't consensus, it's still a discussion to be had, but I hope it's something that can go forward. But in that vein, it's also about, as we've heard it, attending most of these events, and that there's always this talk about the need to include other voices that affect the community who perhaps don't feel empowered or overwhelmed by the process. It just seems chaotic or time issues. And I just shared with the charter group in my response that in Arlington, again, you're talking about why reinvent the wheel. In Arlington, they have, the county in Virginia, they have an active program through the city to actively reach out and expand and curate to parts of the community that have perhaps not represented their voice or just don't know how to engage. And so I also sent that to Jesse, but I was just wondering if, as part of our city objective, what are we doing actively to basically bring in participation? I think would be a nice thing to reflect as an aspiration as well.
Yep.
And it's always improvement,
Yep.
we always improve communication, et cetera.
So the other thing I can share on that is we actually received a municipal planning grant from the state to develop an equity toolkit. Our idea being that you don't have to reinvent the wheel even internally, because we've been doing that for many years, that every time we have an outreach thing, we're like, oh, how should we outreach? Who should we outreach to? Like, how do we communicate? So really setting up a predictable framework for who, how, when, et cetera, that we're doing outreach. That would start in the planning department, because we do a lot of public outreach, but also be applicable across the city government for different city council or recreation or however we do those things. So that's something we'll be working with a consultant on in the next year and a half or so, hopefully to be a model, not only for us internally, but for other municipalities.
I would strongly encourage to highlight that as, the city plan is, what this is a priority for us to make a city in which it is easy to be participatory.
Right, because that
Because
kind
our
of,
world is
yeah.
so busy and hectic, we all don't have enough time, so we, I think, have to break that down. And also culture, my wife is from another country, she goes to the city council meetings. So there's also that.
You're right. Within the text of this document there, we do talk about accessibility and inclusion. But
In the introductory somewhere, and taking an active position, it's not just like it's a sentiment, but, we are taking an active. It's not like we welcome, hi, how do we get a notice out? I mean, people get notices and say, why would I go? I don't understand this. So it's about the program in Arlington takes the next step to actually bring people in and through knowledge, basically empower them. But I welcome them. But
Sorry, just working on the notes. Yeah. Hi.
I was just gonna I guess, echo some of, I guess Bob said first, but it does seem a bit scary that here's this really important planning document for our city for the next 8 years. And while the efforts have been made to get people to participate in these hearings, and I went to the public sessions that were in December and January, and they were better attended than this. But this is a really important thing for our city, and it still feels like you're not really gonna get, I have worries that it's just not gonna get enough feedback from a wide variety of the citizens of South Burlington. I know I'm not suggesting solutions because I don't know what they would be, but it's a bit of concern. I'm glad there will be other public meetings after this draft is sort of finalized, but that's a pretty late stage in the game if people have strong reactions because they haven't been engaged in the past 6 months. So you could end up at a point where really you get your public engagement. They don't like a lot of things, and now you have a document that you don't really have time to rework. So it's just I guess it's a cautionary note.
I have a question for all of you. This is a 112-page document, so I understand that a lot of people are not going to want to read the whole thing, and that is kind of off-putting. I mean, it's hard for a person to feel that they can contribute. Would it have helped? Would it help if instead of this 112 pages, we had made some kind of distillation, if you like, with a few bullet points for each section instead of 100 pages of text, which would give you a clear understanding, or give the reader a clear understanding of what the plan is without having to read 112 pages.
I think the executive summary is in any long document with the IMF, World UN, US Department of State.
I used to do it.
This is the thing, because the assumption is no one's going to read it unless at some point, they may take issue with us, and you could say you had every opportunity to use it, you chose not to, but it's, as you're sort of suggesting, it's slightly disingenuous if the document is overwhelming, and if you get also terminology issues that, I know you have a thing in the back that helps you clarify the terminology, so that the executive summary that highlights the key things, and then sort of simple language as possible, because every sort of sector has its jargon. It goes to make it as least jargon as possible. Like LDRs, you can't say LDRs, at least denominated. I'm not sure.
Least
And one-
discernible
One
regulation.
last comment on, it's Bob Britt, just in the map that's in the index or in the whatever, impact, community facilities comprehensive plan. It presently shows Hubbard Park as a open space in light green. And I noticed that Wheeler and Red Rocks is in dark green because it's a city park. So I think it should be in a city park in dark green. If that's, I mean,
Yeah.
feedback's fine. I do have a couple potential changes on the bike and pedestrian infrastructure, which I'll just send in, but the wondering if we need one for crosswalks, but I don't know, for existing crosswalks and planned crosswalks. It may be just too tiny to be able to see it all, but, and that'll probably be in the master plan. So, but I just, it's one of the things that the Bike and Ped Committee is working on quite a bit and spending money on, is creating more crosswalks. We got the 3, 2 on Wilson Road and 1 on Patchen Road that I think being worked on now.
Awesome. Pizza.
So there's 2 minutes. If anyone would like the last 2 minutes, you are welcome to them.
I just have a clarification question. I received to the last session before coming here, and because someone raised this issue of new parks.
Mhm.
And I would just caught my attention looking over Bob's shoulder at his map, the 2 brown.
Yep.
One in the southeast and the other in on the water. And then you somehow, maybe I misunderstood, you said there are new parks, there's nothing on the map. When you were talking, it wasn't clear to me. She was suggesting there are new parks, you are saying there aren't going to be new parks. I didn't quite understand. the exchange.
So I think what we were talking, I think that was Nora
Yes,
Senecal. We were talking about, she was saying that there are areas that look like they have no planned parks. What that reflects is that the green that's interspersed in like the yellow and red and orange areas is generally existing parks or city-owned lands. Like what Bob's talking about, or some of the school parts of the school properties are shown as green because they're not intended to be developed in a different way. What the map is not showing is that there is not an intention for anything that is a different color to be considered not eligible for new parks.
And what are these 2, and I guess what confused me is.
Yeah.
Bob, if you have that map you just had in your hand, it has these 2 brown spots on it.
There's actually
And they
3.
or 3, and they call them new parks, I think. they're
3,
2.
one down at South Village is
Yeah.
hidden by a camera.
Yeah, it says proposed city park area.
So there's, can I see which map you're looking at?
So I was just trying to, which I welcome, it's great, but then your comments last night made me, or
Yeah.
yesterday, made me
So
sort of feel
those-
like they were not proposed.
So there are parks that are shown on the official map that are not currently owned by the city and are not current parks. But when something is on the official map, it's a statement of city policy to pursue those parks. And also that if someone came in to develop the lands where those are identified, they would have to, it's basically more or less the city has, it's not legally correct, but they have some version of a right of refusal on that development space that the property owner would have to come and offer it to the city before, because it's been adopted as part of the official map.
So it's private land that's,
Right, so there's
Conceivably-
one in South Village that is becoming a park as part of the development of South Village. It is not completed yet. There was one on the shore, the Lake Champlain shoreline. That's on the official map. There's been no movement on that recently. And the other is in the southeast quadrant. I'm not sure what the status of that one
So
is,
those
but
are aspirational, but there's no process that guarantees that they'll come out that way.
correct. There's no guarantee that those will become parks. They're not owned by the city, but they are on the official map. And the official map, changes to the official map are adopted in the same way as changes to our zoning, which is what the LDRs are, the land development regulations. So it's gone through some public process for that. It's the same way that you adopt, like the location of a proposed street so that someone can't build a house right where a street should be. So it's that same level of city process, but it does not guarantee that those will become parks in the future.
And the O'Brien Parks for O'Brien East,
Yep.
is that a city park or just gonna be a private?
I am not sure about the status of all of them, because there's a few. My understanding is at least some of that will become, there's some sort of city partnership. I don't know the ins and
Right,
outs
I
of
know the
exactly
pool
what
is
it
for
is.
the neighborhood, but the fields across the street, I thought were gonna be a city park. but-
There's differences between ownership and management
Ah.
and maintenance and,
Who's doing the
you know,
maintenance?
and who has the use of it and versus who owns it. I'm not sure all the ins and outs of all of that.
Understood.
Because it's fairly
Thanks.
recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't work on the development review side, so
Lucky for you.
some days. Great, well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. There are additional listening sessions. One is on Saturday. That one does have childcare available from 10 to 11:30. Again, snacks, the same as this. You can take a snack on the way out, that, you know, whatever. There's another one on next Tuesday at the same time, noon. All three are in this room. So if, it would be the same as this, so you can attend again if you'd like to, or, you know,
Spread the word.
spread the word to friends and neighbors and anyone who may be interested in attending. And then after that, it will go back to the regular planning commission process, where on August 8th, the planning commission will be receiving, well, they'll receive the sort of end of the week before, the packet of all written comments, all notes that I've been taking from this session and all the other sessions, any comments that have been provided from the other volunteer committees. They'll be considering their own edits to the document from further discussions that they also have been having. That will all be occurring on August 8th with as necessary meetings in the following weeks in August. Thanks again for attending, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
Thanks,
to
Jason.
all of you guys for serving. Appreciate
Hey,
it.
Ryan, I have a question for you.
Yes. One moment. Bob just